Hello, everyone. My name is Craig Thompson. I'm on the board of the Stratford Symphony Orchestra, and I run Ball and Ran Entertainment. And the symphony is coming back on Saturday, April 30th, with a live performance at this Avondale Church, hosted and presented by the one and only Tom Allen, radio host, musician. He's been described as the Garrison Keillor of music in Canada. Tom, welcome, and tell us a little bit about what the show is on Saturday and what people can expect.
All right, thanks. Nice to meet you. Glad to be here, and thrilled to be coming back to Stratford. My goodness, live performances! What a joy to be able to share live performance with people. So this show it's got a name. It's the Classical Good Time Variety Show, and the whole idea is it's a variety show. It's like an old time sort of a circus, a classical music circus that brings in lots of different perspectives on music, lots of fun, lots of storytelling, lots of smut. And so you'd be surprised how smutty classical music is. You know, we've done very well over the centuries at putting on white gloves and covering all that up, but you can't hide the truth forever. And so it tends to come out in these shows. There is lots of audience participation. There is a chance for the audience to vote on two musical combatants and say which one they want to hear, and give their expression, give their reasons why they're making the choice they are. There's a look at an relatively unknown composer with a very colorful life, and much else. It really is kind of like an old time television variety show that just happens to have classical music as its elements instead of the Beatles and a plate spinner.
So a good time, that's the key word.
That is the key word. And yes, I took it from one of my childhood heroes from when I was 8 or 9. Glenn Campbell had a weekly television show, the Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour. And I thought, you know, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with having a good time? So that's where that comes from.
So you mentioned smut, Tom. You can't get away with that on CBC Radio. Is it PG-13 here, or is it friendly smut?
You'd be surprised how smutty the CBC can be. You just have to listen closely. You know, we're a pretty transparent society, we Canadians. So yeah, no, I wouldn't call it PG-13. I think it's open to all ages, but the stories are the real thing.
Because I'm bringing my 7-year-old daughter, just so you know.
Well, okay, I'll look for her and make sure that I adjust myself accordingly.
I don't want to spoil it for anybody else, but just with that.
No, I'm actually amping that up for fun, but it's an entirely family-friendly show.
Yeah. So, Tom, tell me about the intersection between your musical career and a communicator. You've been a CBC radio host for what, 3 or 4 decades, a long time. You hosted a bunch of different shows, which has almost made you, I think, an everyman. You've probably learned an enormous amount that you never imagined you would. Would you say that has sort of given you kind of a real insight into classical music or music in general?
Well, I hope so. I mean, the thing that most people I don't think realize is that when you're a musician, when you train as a musician in any area, you don't necessarily know very much about the history or the context of what you're playing. So much of the work is devoted to learning to just do it, to just master the craft and the art of making music. So I was a trombone player professionally for, well, almost 15 years. And when I ended up starting working at the CBC, I learned very quickly how little I knew about the music I'd been playing for the last decade. And furthermore, how much of what I knew was wrong. You know, so it's a real sobering thing to look at and try to gain a sense of context. And further, the other thing I've learned and that I've tried to work on is that people love music. People come to music from all areas, and classical music tends to have this kind of entrance exam culture where you're not supposed to enjoy it until you've studied music for a whole long time or know a bunch of ridiculous arcane 19th century jargon, which is really not what any of the composers would have wanted, nor is it in the spirit of what was made. So I've tried to find ways of breaking down those barriers. And one of the main things is to talk about the circumstances around the creation of music, because every piece of music, every piece of art in the history of the world, whether it was written in 1685 or now, is influenced by what's going on around us. That you can't help as an artist but reflect your own life and your own time. So I try to look at what was happening and what brought that composer or those performers to the place that they were. And invariably, it's a good story. Almost everyone is a good story. And it also reminds an audience that may not be, versed in classical music jargon, that these people were just like us. Yes, Mozart was capable of unbelievable musical feats, but he still had to do the dishes. He still had to deal with the rent. He still had to struggle through all the other aspects of life. And that in that way, he's only really different from us in one area, and all the rest, he's just like we are.
As a former radio person myself, there's a difference between sitting behind a microphone in a dark room and standing in front of several hundred people. What for you is that difference? Obviously, having an audience, you don't hear people talking back to you apart from your producer in the control room.
No, I'll admit there are a few times when I've said things on the radio and I can almost hear people screaming back at me in the moment, but no, you can't quite. No, it's a thrill having an audience there and sharing stories, and especially inviting input. I mean, that's one of the great things about this show. There's a segment that we devote to the specific day of that show, and it's going to feature a member of the orchestra who happens to have more than one passion in his life. He's a great musician, and he's also a very good beer maker. So there's a little focus on that. We also, as I say, we invite votes on the music we're playing and opinions on why that choice should be made. So there are lots of opportunities to interact. And for me, I've always been an entertainer in that way. Radio was more the exception than the rule. To learn to not have an audience was a greater challenge for me than the other way around.
You've also been lucky because you've taken the temperature of music across Canada, and here in Stratford, we're an arts and culture town. We're known all over North America, and we're very proud to have a small but very good symphony orchestra that has managed to survive for 17, 18 years. Can you give us some objective, perhaps biased because you're coming here to perform, but a view of the Stratford Symphony Orchestra and how lucky we are to have a professional orchestra like that?
Oh, yeah, that doesn't have to be, that's not difficult to do, especially in the current climate. Symphony orchestras have suffered tremendously, as have all performing arts organizations. But for a city to have its own orchestra is not just a musical vehicle. It's a position of pride. It's a statement of cultural values. It's a statement of civic integrity to be able to say that this is our orchestra. And in the case of this group, I know a few people who've performed with the symphony, and I'm very excited to have my first chance, but it really is a representation of the community. I mean, I know there are few people that come in from other communities to fill out the ranks, but mostly these people are from Stratford. And for a city that size to have a functioning full symphony orchestra capable of playing these big, beautiful, romantic pieces is pretty impressive. It really is. And to have a mixture of professional and community musicians coming together and creating this thing, I think is a really, really great statement. And as you say, it falls in line with everything else that happens in Stratford. Great food, great theater, other great music festivals. It's a remarkable community.
So to everybody watching and listening, the concert takes place on Saturday, April 30th, 7:30 p.m. at Avondale Church, Stratford Symphony. Good time variety show with Tom Allen. There's a few tickets left on sale. They're available at the door or by going to our website, stratfordsymphony.ca. Tom, we can't wait to host you in Stratford, and we're very excited to see the show, our first live in-person show in some time. So thanks very much.
My pleasure. I'm very excited as well. Thanks.